Since early civilization, people have been gravitating to spaces with larger communities in search of better opportunities. According to UrbanNet in 2021, in 1980, 39% of the world population were living in cities. In 2015, this had increased to 54%, and by 2050, the urban share of the world population is projected to be 66%. The COVID-19 pandemic has worsened the plight of slum dwellers in parts of Asia and Africa, with more than 1 billion slum dwellers residing in these areas. Slum dwelling may be the only solution for the urban poor to secure shelter. Development and planning, therefore, needs to be inclusive of vulnerable populations. At the same time, only half of the world's population has convenient access to public transportation, and women are disproportionately affected in terms of access to housing, clean water, and sanitation. In addition, the environmental degradation resulting from issues such as greenhouse gas and waste pollution require planning and implementing programs that reduce our future impact, reduce inequality, and improve infrastructure and innovation. At present, 156 countries developed national urban policies, but only half of these countries are in the implementation stage of these policies. For these issues to be addressed, we need investment in infrastructure such as transport systems. We need decision makers to communicate, engage, plan, and reflect with the citizens, and to take into account the needs and aspirations of these citizens. Incentives such as tax breaks, grants, and loans should be encouraged to help citizens make more sustainable choices. Sustainable and inclusive development is more likely to be realized through community activism, volunteering, lobbying, and mobilization of resources. What can you do? Take an interest in the issues that affect your city, especially those that impact on equality and sustainability. Use your voice by reaching out to stakeholders in the community for them to assist you in taking action towards resolving these problems. When you use your voice as a citizen, you demonstrate to government that empowerment and sustainability in urban development needs to be prioritized. You can get involved in activities such as community gardening, support a food bank, and by getting a better understanding of issues that affect vulnerable communities in the city. You can support causes that aim to protect and create more green spaces, celebrate your community's culture and heritage, and plan and promote sustainable development projects. More importantly, speak up and speak out about the issues that affect the lives of the most vulnerable citizens of your city.
Potatoes on Rooftops, Farming in the City by Hadley Dyer. My city garden. A gasp pierces the early morning quiet. The scene is stomach churning. Red and purple gusts spilled onto a dusty deck floor. A lovingly raised, perfectly perfect tomato, torn from its vine, chomped and tossed aside by a squirrel. If you've never tended a vegetable garden, this might seem a tad dramatic. But if you've ever picked a sun-warmed tomato that you grew yourself, washed it under a hose, and bit into it like an apple, you'll understand the need for a horror movie soundtrack. My house is about the size of a toadstool, but it has a large yard. After success growing vegetables in pots on my deck, I contacted a small business called Young Urban Farmers to help me set up a proper garden. Young Urban Farmers is run by a group of entrepreneurs in their 20s who cleverly realized there was money to be made helping wannabe green thumbs like me. One of the owners, Chris Wong, came over to assess my growing spaces and answer questions. I had a lot of them. Is my soil safe? Yes. Will my food be contaminated with pollution? No. Will my dog eat my crops or pee on them? No and yes. Now I know I can plant just about anything in my city yard, and you might plant in the countryside. Now I see the secret of making the best person. It is to grow in the open air and to eat and sleep with the earth. Quote by Walt Whitman. This book is about growing food in cities, something hundreds of millions of people are doing around the world, either because they want to or they have to. Many of these people are young. At first, it may not be obvious why kids and teens are growing potatoes on rooftops, peppers or balconies, and beans along concrete walls. Frankly, it wasn't always obvious to me why I bothered hoeing soil and watering plants when I could have picked up dinner at the grocery store around the corner. But every day brings its own reason, because no workout feels as good as an afternoon in the garden, because the sight of a little green spot nudging up from the earth makes me ridiculously proud, because scientific evidence suggests we are not actually going to live forever, but eating healthier, safer foods might prolong things a bit. There are a whole bunch of other reasons, to which you'll find in these pages, but the biggest one is this: because how we get our food matters. It has an impact on the environment, our communities, on our bodies, and people in far-off corners of the planet. And there is one more big reason, because nothing I've bought at the store has ever tasted as good as the one of those sun-warmed tomatoes. Hadley Dyer. Part 1. Hungry Cities. A great city is not to be confounded with a populous one. Quote by Aristotle, a Greek philosopher. City living. Cities are growing fast. About 3.2 billion people live in cities today. That's over half the world's population. In fact, for the first time in history, more people live in cities, urban areas, than in small towns and the countryside, rural areas. And we aren't moving back to rural areas anytime soon. The United Nations predict that 2/3 of us will live in cities by 2030. It also estimates that 30 years from now, we'll need 60% more food to feed the world. Where will all that food come from? Well, some of it will be grown in factory-style farms, which already produces most of the items in our grocery stores, but a lot of people think that isn't the best, and certainly not the only solution. Transporting food from huge farms that are far away from our cities has created new problems, especially for the environment and our health. Cities need other ways to fill stomachs with good food. The Big 10. Megacities have more than 10 million residents. Those residents include the people who live right in the city and, in some cases, the areas that border them. There are currently 21 megacities around the world and counting. The following are the 10 biggest on the planet. Most need to import at least 5,400 of food every day. 1. Tokyo, Japan, 37 million. Delhi, India, 22 million. Sao Paulo, Brazil, 20 million. Mumbai, India, 20 million. New York, United States, 19 million. Mexico City, 19 million. Shanghai, China, 17 million. Kolkata, India, 16 million. Dhaka, Bangladesh, 15 million. Karachi, Pakistan, 13 million. Japan is a densely populated country of 127 million people living in an area about the size of California. Without enough space to grow food for all of its citizens, it has to import 60% of its food from other countries, more than any other wealthy nation. North America is one of the most urbanized areas on Earth, meaning that a heck of a lot of us live in cities. Just over 80% of Americans and Canadians are city dwellers. In Mexico, about half the population live in urban areas. Food miles. People started farming the land about 10,000 years ago. Earlier, we hunted and gathered our food, tracking wildlife and munching on plants like berries and leaves. Then we figured out it was much easier if our food was produced right in front of us. We started raising animals and learned how to plant seeds so we could have more of the foods that we need and like. We began to change our environment, cutting down trees and removing plants we couldn't eat to make more space for growing things. As we began to move into cities to work in factories, we had to start bringing our food from countryside. Our farms grew along with our cities, but with bigger harvests, fewer types of crops, and fewer people tending them. Advertisers want you to believe that most food is still grown on family farms, where the sun is always just rising or setting and someone wearing old-timey overalls lovingly tending the crops by hand. The truth is, most of today's farms look and are run just like factories, and their products are shipped around the globe. Does your meal need a map? A food mile refers to the distance your food has traveled from the farm to your plate. In North America, food may travel hundreds or even thousands of miles. What's so terrible about your meal collecting miles? Transporting food long distances required a lot of fuel. All those trucks and planes also belch a lot of pollution and greenhouse gases into the air, contributing to global warming. As well, spending lots of time in storage causes fruits and vegetables to lose nutrition. Some research has shown that a loss of 30 to 50% of nutrition over a 5 to 10 day period. Packaged foods often contain a long list of ingredients. Each of those ingredients had to travel to a factory to be processed, and then from that factory to a store. In the mid-19th century, about 75% of North Americans worked in agriculture. Today, that number is just 2%. Pass the potato. People who worry about food miles like to see the shortest distance possible between the farm and your table. Imagine the journey as a game of hot potato. The longer the distance between the farm and your table, the cooler the potato will be when it arrives. A seed potato producer ships potatoes to be potato grower. A farmer grows a potato hot stuff. Potatoes aren't actually hot when they're coming out of the ground, right? The farmer delivers the potato to a distribution center which collects produce from many different farms. Then the distributor takes orders from the store and delivers those orders. The store sells a potato to you. You bring the potato home stone cold. We'll still always need rural farms. At the moment, the vast majority of North America's food supply can be traced back to rural farms. How much of this food could be grown in cities instead? As you'll see in the following pages, some people think the sky is the limit, literally. Realistically though, even if all city dwellers were to grow some of their own food, we'd still always need the big growing spaces of the countryside, especially for crops that take up a lot of room, like wheat. Buying food that was grown as close as home as possible, whether from a farm that's near your city or in your own backyard, is just part of the solution to the very big problem of how to feed the world without destroying the environment. Life on the fringes. They are known as shanty towns or slums. Located in the outer limits or large cities, they are home to millions of people who have moved in from the countryside. But many of the fastest growing cities are also the poorest and can't provide for all their new arrivals. People come to cities to fulfill their dreams of decent jobs, good schools, and a better way of life than their small villages can offer. They can't afford to buy homes or pay rent in urban centers, so they have to settle on the fringes. There, they may live without such basic service as fresh water, sewage system, and garbage collection. They may have to travel far to get to jobs and school and food shops. Garden city. Like cities all over the world, American cities boomed in the 19th century. From 1860 to 1910, the nation's population tripled, but many citizens did not do well in their new neighborhoods. Living in squalor with improper housing and sanitation, and surrounded by crime, the City Beautiful movement in the United States and the Garden City movement in the United Kingdom improved the appearance of cities and made them more livable by creating public parks and garden plots. About 15 million people in China leave their rural villages and move into cities every year. In sub-Saharan Africa, the part of the continent that's south of the Sahara Desert, 62% of people in urban areas live in slums. The term developing country generally refers to a country that can't yet provide all its people with the necessities of life and safe environment. Almost half the population of the developing world is under the age of 25. The population of Lubumbashi in the Democratic Republic of Congo exploded between 2000 and 2010, rising by 50% to more than 1.5 million people. Farms and markets created around the perimeter or outskirts of the city are now a major source of fresh food. Growing food on the edges of cities is known as peri-urban agriculture. Inner city deserts. In North America, food is everywhere. Sometimes it seems as though you can't walk a city block without being tempted by a sweet treat or salty snack. We have more than enough food to go around, so why do some people have trouble finding good things to eat? Cities across North America have food deserts, neighborhoods without sources of good food nearby. No grocery stores, no farmers markets, no fruit stands. The option can be pretty grim for those who can't travel easily to another neighborhood, especially people living on a low income. Convenience stores charge up to 1.5 times as much as grocery stores, so a carton of eggs might cost $4 instead of $2.5. The only other option might be a fast food restaurant where the calories are plentiful but the food is full of fat and salt. In the United States, 2.3 million households are more than 1.6 kilometers from a grocery store. An additional 3.4 million households are a little closer, but don't have access to vehicles or to a good public transit. The situation in Canada isn't much better. In Toronto, Canada's biggest city, half the population lives more than 1 kilometer away from a grocery store. What's a city dweller to do if she doesn't want to pay a king's ransom for an egg? A box of cheesy noodles from the corner store might be cheap and convenient, but it's also high in calories and low in nutrition. Food oases in unexpected places. Accra, the capital of Ghana, grows 90% of the vegetables eaten by its citizens. Backyard gardens supply some of the veggies, and the rest are grown in open spaces within the city. One of those cities is Dorzwulu, Roman Ridge area. Buildings can't be erected there because of a nearby electricity substation, so space that could be otherwise go to waste is being used for growing food. What unused spaces in your city could be reclaimed for urban farming? Security alert. Are you food secure? Food security is a fancy schmancy term that means having food to eat. People who are food secure have enough safe, nutritious food to fuel the normal activities. Almost 1 billion people worldwide don't meet that minimum. They are underfed and undernourished. Most hungry people live in the developing countries, but not all of them. About 15% of people in the United States and Canada suffer from food insecurity. In some areas of the world, wars and other conflicts have forced people from their homes and destroyed farmland. Bad weather and natural disasters such as flooding or droughts can also ruin crops and cause hardships. But the number one reason people are hungry is poverty. People living in poverty simply don't have enough money to cover their basic needs for food, shelter, and clothing. In recent years, rising food prices have made global hunger even worse. Natural disasters, which many scientists say are on the rise because of global warming and higher fuel prices, are largely to blame. In 2007, thousands of Mexicans took to the streets to protest the price of tortillas, which skyrocketed by 400%. The same year, drought in Australia forced farmers to cut their wheat harvest by half and increased their prices. The following year, the cost of rice, a staple food around the world, but especially in Asia, doubled. Organizations that help fight hunger are studying a simple but radical solution to the challenge of ever-changing food prices. Maybe the best way for people to protect themselves is to not buy all their food in the first place. Maybe other sources of food could be under our noses or under our feet. Hunger by numbers. About 98% of the world's hungry people live in developing countries. Some poor urban households spend up to 80% of their income on food. More than 1 billion people survive on $1.25 per day or less, which the United States nations and other organizations defining as living in extreme poverty. About 30% of population in sub-Saharan Africa, 239 million people, is undernourished, the highest rate in the world. Asia and the Pacific is home to the greatest number of hungry people, 578 million in total. About 19% of households in Mississippi lack food security, the highest rate in the United States. Part 2. Plant a seed. To plant a seed, watch it grow, to tend it, and then harvest it, offered a simple but enduring satisfaction. The sense of being the custodian of the small patch of earth offered a small taste of freedom. Quote from Nelson Mandela, former President of South Africa. Changing the urban landscape. Cities are sometimes called concrete jungles, but imagine an urban neighborhood so lush and leafy it seems more like an actual jungle. Picture your lunch growing on a vine just outside your classroom window. In some cities, these images are becoming real. About 800 million people grow their food in urban areas, from humble herb patches to state-of-the-art farms, and their numbers are growing up. Those gardeners and farmers are leading the way towards greener, healthier cities. They are changing our urban landscape while planting the seed for our future. A taste of freedom. Former South African President Nelson Mandela spent 27 years as a political prisoner on Robben Island. He dug into the rocky soil with his bare hands to create a vegetable patch that was just 0.9 meters, 1 yard wide, and shared his harvest with fellow prisoners. People visit his garden today as a monument of kindness, perseverance, and hope. If Mandela's humble garden had the power to transform lives, what could we do with the space, tools, and technology available in our cities? Ye Old Victory Garden. Everyone who creates or cultivates a garden helps. This is the time for America to correct her unpardonable fault of wastefulness and extravagance. Quote from American President Woodrow Wilson in 1917. During World War I, which was in 1914 until 1918, cities around the world began running out of food. Thousands of farmers served in the army instead of tilling their fields. Fertile ground was destroyed by combat and bombs. International waters became very dangerous for ships carrying food. In 1917, a new organization in the United States called the National War Garden Commission decided the solution was to grow food on a small scale closer to home. It encouraged citizens to use all available growing spaces and taught people how to can and preserve food. Soon after, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, began its own campaign to get people growing. As a result, the number of garden plots rose from 3.5 million in 1917 to more than 5 million in 1918. Another victory for gardens. During World War II, in 1939 and 1945, the Food War Administration in the United States created the National Victory Garden Program. Its goal was to recreate the huge success of gardening movement during the previous war. This time, the results were even more outstanding. The USDA estimated that more than 20 million plots were planted during the war. By growing fruit and vegetables, people felt they were contributing to the war effort, ensuring the country and its soldiers had and freeing up resources needed in wartime. For example, metals and other materials normally used in food production could be put to military use instead. Railroad cars carried less food, allowing them to carry more munitions. One of those 20 million victory gardens was planted on the White House grounds by First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt in 1943. 66 years later, in 2009, First Lady Michelle Obama planted an organic garden to provide fresh produce for formal diners and to serve as a teaching garden for visiting school children. In the United States, the Fenway Victory Gardens of Boston and the Dowling Community Garden of Minneapolis are the best last remaining victory gardens from the wars. Every available inch. What was old is new again. Those victory gardeners were way ahead of their time. As we've seen, even in peacetime, there are plenty of reasons to grow our own food in cities. But not everyone has a yard that can be turned into a garden, and some neighborhoods have no green spaces at all. How do you turn a concrete jungle into a source of fresh, healthy food? Fortunately, there's nothing engineers and architects love better than a challenge. Vertical gardens. When cities are too jam-packed to create wide growing spaces, one alternative is to go up and up and up. Also known as living walls, vertical gardens can transform brick, concrete, and siding into artistic and even edible walls. The Urban Farming Food Chain Project in Los Angeles created food-producing wall panels that are mounted on buildings. Those who tend the walls reap the harvest, which is not sold commercially. You can create your own wall panel by recycling shelving units and adding hanging parts to wooden fences, or even hanging old shoe organizers. Towering farms. Vertical farms take the concept of growing upward to the next level, skyward. Designers have been imagining high-rise growing spaces that aim to produce as much food as possible without draining all of a city's resources. Creating a vertical farm is more complicated than building a living wall, and it's a bigger venture than just converting office towers into farms. For example, if sunlight can't reach all of the plants, solar panels may need to be installed to supply energy for artificial growing lights. Designs also have to include ways to capture, recycle, and pump water throughout the building. Until someone constructs the first vertical farm, we won't know all the challenges of building one or the advantages such a farm might bring to a community. But with so many people energized by the innovative plans, it's only a matter of time until we find out. An architect named Gordon Graft designed a 58-story green building called Sky Farm for the city of Toronto. It has 743,000 square meters of growing space, enough to feed 35,000 people per year. Time will tell whether a costly, untested project like this will come to be, but it's the right kind of dreaming. Shaping up. Plants need sunlight to grow. In a vertical building, the upper levels can cast a shadow over the lower levels, so designers are experimenting with shapes that will allow light to reach all the growing spaces. Natalie Jeremenjenko, an engineer and artist, created these pot-like greenhouses. Although they're called urban space stations, their job here on Earth is to provide growing spaces. Each structure's clear, curved surface absorbs light as the sign moves across the building, and the pod recycles air and water from the building below. Because it doesn't need soil, the station is light enough to be raised off the ground. Burrowing underground. What lies beneath our city streets? In Tokyo, an underground bank vault was turned into a high-tech farm called Persona O2. The farm covers 1,000 square meters and grows more than 100 types of produce. It uses a combination of halide LED and fluorescent lights, as well as hydroponics, raising crops without soil. With hydroponics, plants are grown in water-containing nutrition solution or materials like gravel or perlite. The word hydroponics comes from the Greek word for water, hydro, and labor, ponos. In addition to growing foods, Persona O2 has a very important goal: to create jobs for youth and older employees who need a second career. Rooftop gardens. Hydroponics can also solve the problem of how to take advantage of all that terrific unused space way up there. On rooftops. Not all rooftops can handle a heavy load of dense soil, but hydroponics can lighten the load by using lighter materials or shallow water beds. Rooftops get screamingly hot in the summertime, up to 32 degrees warmer than the air, but a green roof can actually be cooler than the air. That's because plants do a cool thing called transpiration. They take water in through their roots and then release it through their leaves. The heat from the air is used to evaporate the water, bringing temperatures down. The idea is clearly catching on. A group called the Rooftop Garden Project has green roofs all over Montreal and has begun sharing its techniques with people in other countries. They've even taken their skills to Haiti to help establish urban agriculture there in the aftermath of the 2010 earthquake. In Chicago, the Gary Comer Youth Center occupies a building that used to be an abandoned warehouse. It's a huge reinforced structure topped by an 800 square meter rooftop garden. The soil for the garden is 46 centimeters deep and grows an amazing 454 kilograms of organic vegetables per year. The produce is brought home by the volunteer gardeners and is used in the center's cooking classes. In Tokyo, 2 telecommunications companies sponsored the planting of sweet potatoes in rooftop gardens, a project they called the Green Potato. The white leaves of the plants were so effective at transpiration that the leaf-covered areas were more than 20 degrees cooler than the areas not covered by leaves. Pets. Cities are full of wildlife. Much of it will be delighted by the buffet on your balcony. Birds may feast on your berries, raccoons will run off with your harvest, and a compost heap can attract mice and rats. If you've got critters in your neighborhood, you can bet you'll have to garden your garden against them, such as by protecting plants with chicken wire. Cost. The startup cost for a big garden can be a little overwhelming. You may need to buy gardening tools, soil fertilizer, compost seeds, or seedlings, containers. It really adds up. But the money your family saves by growing some of your own food instead of buying it can make up for this cost in as little as one harvest. In the meantime, you can save money by borrowing tools and using household items like buckets for containers. Cut costs even more by choosing seeds over seedlings, which are more expensive, and by sharing seeds and plant cuttings with other growers. Some types of fruits and vegetables will yield seeds that you can save for the next planting season. Pollution solutions. Vegetables may be full of vitamins and other health-giving goodies, but are city-grown veggies safe? What about all those cars coughing on your lettuce? Most airborne pollutants will come off your veggies with good washing. The more dangerous kinds are lurking underground. Chemicals from nearby industrial sites can turn the earth toxic. One of the most common and dangerous contaminants is lead. It can leach into the soil from paint and lead plumbing pipes, among other things. Gardeners who have reason to believe their soil isn't safe can send a soil sample to a lab for testing. Private companies, many city health departments, and some universities also offer this service. If the soil is contaminated, it can often be fixed using lime and organic matter. To be extra safe, concerned gardeners can stick with fruiting crops such as peppers, because the edible part that grows above the soil and the parts below the soil don't absorb a lot of chemicals. Or they can grow plants in containers or raised beds with fresh soil instead. Testing can reveal other things about soil, such as nutrition it contains, which will influence the type of plants you can grow. If it turns out the soil is safe but of poor quality, you may be able to improve it by adding compost. Is it a fruit or a vegetable? A botanist, someone who studies plants, will say that if it's freshly has seeds and comes from a flowering plant, it's a fruit. If, however, you eat the root, leaves, or stem, it's a vegetable. So an eggplant is a fruit, and so is a walnut, but carrots, celery, and potatoes are veggies. Small but mighty. Sometimes the answer to a big problem comes in a tiny package. Microgardens are small gardens for people, maybe like you, who don't have enough space for a full-size plot. They're also less physically demanding, which makes them easier for kids, senior citizens, and people with physical disabilities. Because microgardens need only a small amount of soil and another growing material, they're popular in places where soil isn't plentiful or safe. They also need less water than traditional gardens, which is a big plus when clean water is scarce. Just how much food can you grow in a small garden? According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, a garden of just 1 square meter can yield 200 tomatoes per year. That's a lot of spaghetti sauce. Small gardens, big impact. Microgardens are making a real difference to people in the developing world. For example, 1,500 families in El Alto, Bolivia, were given small greenhouses and taught how to grow fruits, vegetables, and herbs. The money these families save by growing their own produce can be used to buy other essentials, including non-plant sources of protein such as meat, dairy, and eggs. In an area where nearly 3 out of 4 families live in poverty, food budgets are now stretching much further and diets are becoming healthier. About 80% of the vegetables eaten in Hanoi, the capital of Vietnam, are grown in and around the city. But Hanoi is expanding quickly, with new streets and buildings gobbling up farmland and rice fields, so people must rely more on the small garden plots allotted to many households. Or in a blue bin, or in a narrow raised planter. Great greens. Greens such as lettuce or spinach are some of the best plants to grow in a microgarden. They have shallow roots, so they don't need deep soil and they sprout quickly. Leafy greens are so excellent crops for techniques such as succession planting. Seeds or seedlings are planted in batches, with each batch started a few weeks after the other before it. By the time you finish harvesting the first batch, the next batch is ready to go. You'll never run out of salad again. Sorry, leaf eaters. Bottles, boots, and buckets. Think you don't have enough space for a microgarden? No space is too small for growing food as long as it gets lots of sunlight and you choose the right container for your crop. For inspiration, take a look around your city and the internet. You may spot goodies growing in most unexpected places. The downside of container gardening is that the soil can dry out quickly in the sun. You'll need water for almost every day, maybe even twice per day. Some of that water will drain out the bottom of the pot, so make sure it won't be dripping into your neighbor's balcony. Soggy roots can rot. Plant containers should have holes in the bottom to allow water to drain out. A simple colander, the kind for draining spaghetti, is perfect for lettuce. Plants with short roots, such as spinach and herbs, can be planted in just about any type of shallow container, from window boxes to kiddie pools, to recycled plastic, wood, food containers. Some plants, such as tomatoes and zucchini, have deep roots and need big pots. Large buckets may make great containers for these plants. The community garden. Another solution for city dwellers with limited space is to share. Community gardens are places in a city where people can get together to grow food and other plants. They add green spaces to neighborhoods and can make a world of a difference in food deserts, where fresh produce is hard to come by. No two community gardens are exactly alike. Some are group efforts where all the work and the harvest are shared and maybe even sold at a farmer's market. Others are divided into separate plots so each person or family can have their own. Most expect members to tend their gardens regularly and do some communal work, such as cleaning out the common areas before winter. Ingredients of a great community garden. Tools. Many community gardens share tools that stay on site so people don't have to lug their own and split the cost. The tools are kept in a locked shed and members have keys. Water. A long hose and a rain barrel are handy when rainfall alone isn't enough to give the plants a good soaking. Rest spots. Some community gardens include areas where members can chill out and little kids can play without trampling the plants. Shared knowledge. One of the best reasons to grow food alongside others is all the information and tips shared among gardening friends. Every dollar that's spent on a community garden plot may yield up to $6 worth of veggies. Organic island. The cities of Cuba are marvels of urban agriculture. Around each corner is a huerta, a small garden plot, filled with raised vegetable beds, or a community garden called an organoponico. This small island nation used to be close friends with the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Empire crumbled in 1989, Cuba lost its major trading partner and main source of petroleum oil for large farming machinery, as well as fertilizers and pesticides. food production slowed and food shortages began. More than 3/4 of Cuba's 11 million people live in cities, many of which are decaying with crumbling buildings and vacant lots. Cubans began to use these to their advantage, clearing out debris to create growing spaces. Today, there are about 7,000 organoponicos throughout the country. About 70% of the produce eaten in Cuba is grown organically. Most of the produce is sold at the garden site or very close by, or is used by the families who garden there. Cuba still has to import most of its food, including staples such as corn, wheat, flour, and oil. And the country suffers when food prices go up, but at least it has a reliable source of organic fruits and vegetables. In 2006, the city of Vancouver decided to set a special goal leading up to hosting the 2010 Winter Olympic Games. Create 2010 new urban garden plots. It challenged individuals, families, community groups, and neighborhood gardens to help Vancouver beat the number by the beginning of 2010. Good Eats. Feeding hungry people is just one good reason to break out your gardening gloves. You'll discover another the first time you bite into a carrot you've grown yourself. Taste. Why does home and locally grown produce taste so good? The answer takes us back to the 1950s, when food growers started focusing on hybrid varieties of fruits and vegetables. A hybrid is a combination of two or more different types of the same plant. The plants are cross-pollinated to get particular qualities from each other. For example, one type of tomato may be able to resist diseases, while another might be big, colorful, or able to stand up to traveling large distances. Factory farms tend to stick to a few types of hybrids that are reliable for mass production. The tomato you grow or buy from a local farmer may be a hybrid variety where taste was made a priority, or it could be a heirloom variety. Like the heirlooms or any antiques at your granny's house, a heirloom plant was grown in an early era, usually in the time before hybrids became popular. Heirlooms may not travel as well or produce as many fruits as hybrids, but they can be absolutely delicious. They all look so different from one another in color, shape, and size. Growing heirlooms is a nice way to feel connected with food growers from the past and to ensure these varieties aren't lost forever. Going local. Laissez-voirs are people who try to source all or most of their food locally by growing or picking it, or by buying from a local market. Unfortunately, because smaller farms produce less food than factory farms, their prices are often higher to recover cost. Is it worth paying more for local food if you can afford to? The laissez-faire movement says yes. Just like the fruits and vegetables you grow yourself, foods from small local farms tend to taste better and come in more varieties than mass-produced kind. Because they don't have to travel so far, local farmers can pick their produce just before they bring it to the market, preserving their nutritional value, freshness, and flavor. Local farmers can also tell you how their animals were raised, whether the animals roamed free, whether they ate the foods nature intended for them, and whether they were slaughtered as humanely as possible. Tomato. One of the first plants people grow when they start gardening is tomatoes. They are so much more tomatoey than the supermarket kind, but as you can see below, taste isn't the only difference. Heirloom. It's grown in large pots on a sunny balcony. Were grown with an organic fertilizer. were grown without pesticides or herbicides, may not win any beauty contests, have a high yield, a low yield, or an in-between yield. If homegrown, are less expensive than any tomatoes you can buy. Traveled only 1 mile food miles. Hybrid. Hybrids are grown on a large factory farm and bought from a grocery store. Travel well, aren't easily bruised or squished. Have a high yield, plant produces a lot of fruit, may have been grown with pesticides, may have been grown with herbicides, are less expensive than heirlooms sold at the nearby farmers markets, possibly travel thousands of food miles. Get growing. Still looking for a reason to get growing? Chances are farm fashion isn't going to convince you, and mucking around in the garden isn't pretty. You'll get filthy, you'll sweat, and people may smell you a mile away, and not because you've got basil in your pocket. The flip side of all that hard labor is that you can get super fit. Studies show that being active throughout the day can burn way more calories than just working out in the gym. All that bending, lifting, and carrying is a great strength training, firming up the major muscle groups in your chest, back, legs, and shoulders. Chores like shoveling are cardiovascular exercises in disguise, working your lungs and heart. Gardening is good for the mind and the soul too. The combination of exercise, time in the sunshine, and fun mucking around in the dirt can help boost your mood and make you feel full of energy. And guess what? Research shows you're more likely to eat fruits and vegetables you've grown yourself, so you'll also be getting better nutrition. Those additional vitamins and minerals in your diet will make your skin glow and your hair shine and your nails stronger, if somewhat dirtier. Easy does it. You can burn up to 300 calories an hour in the garden, about the same as with very brisk walking. Follow these tips to have a safe workout in the vegetable patch. Whenever possible, bend at the knees, not your waist, so you don't strain your lower back. Build up your stamina slowly, starting with a short session in the garden and gradually increase the time. If you do too much too soon, you could wind up with an injury or become overly sore. Always wear sunscreen to prevent burns and skin damage. Stretch, stretch, and stretch some more to help prevent injuries. Drink lots of water. Food for thought. Horticulture therapy uses plant-related activities to help people work through a whole bunch of physical and mental health issues, from recovering from surgery to reducing depression. Working with plants is soothing and improves motor skills and concentration. And because it requires problem solving and goal setting, self-confidence can go up as well. What if all hospitals had green spaces, indoors or out, for their patients? Would some patients get better quicker? Part 3. Green your city. When I go in my garden with a spade and dig a bed, I feel such an exhilaration and health that I discover that I have been defrauding myself all this time in letting others do for me what I should have done with my own hands. A quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Beyond kale and kiddie pools. Listen, we all know what's going on out there. Forests are being cut down, the sky is full of pollution, and the planet is heating up. It's enough to make you want to hide under the covers. Cities may seem like the biggest offenders of all. What could be more opposite from green than the color of concrete? But cities have an important role to play in healing Earth and conserving our precious resources. For example, when people live, work, and go to school in the same area, they can walk, bike, or take public transit, cutting down on fuel emissions from cars. It's a big plus to the environment when millions of people have everything they need close by, including the food they eat. Easy enough when you're talking about growing kale in kiddie pools or jalapenos in buckets, but it's not like you can have a flock of chickens or a school of fish on your roof, or can you? Turn down the heat. You know that expression, it's so hot you could fry an egg on the sidewalk? In many cities, that's awfully close to the truth. In the summertime, all those concrete and asphalt buildings, roads, and sidewalks heat up in the sun. The result is that a city of 1 million people or more can become a heat island that's between 1 and 3 degrees hotter than the countryside surrounding it. And that's just the air temperature. The pavement under your feet can be 27 to 50 degrees hotter than the air. Guess what happens next? On goes the air conditioners and up goes the power usage. Some of the fuel used for power releases greenhouse gases into the air. And since these gases are among the major causes of global warming, cities keep getting hotter and hotter. How can you help cool down cities and slow down global warming? Plant things. Shade from trees gives instant relief from the heat, and green roofs lower temperatures through transpiration. As well, plants absorb carbon dioxide, a major greenhouse gas, from the air, removing more than they can release. Growing food in the cities can be as good for Earth as it is for our health, and not just by cooling things down. Who knew you could help save the environment just by pulling on those snazzy rubber boots? Chilly cities. For many northern cities, environmental woes come not from being too hot, but too cold. Summers are so short, there isn't enough time for a big harvest of heat and sun-loving crops. As a result, groceries have to be driven or flown a lot of food miles from more southern climates. But with a greenhouse, all season can be growing seasons. The Anuvik Community Greenhouse in Canada's Northwest Territories is the most northerly of its kind. Although the area gets 24 hours of sunlight in summer, the cool climate makes it very difficult to grow many fruits and vegetables. So, an old arena was converted into an enormous greenhouse. The first floor has 74 garden plots that community members can rent. The second floor has a commercial growing space, which raises money that keeps the operation going. If an Arctic town can grow food all year round, imagine the possibilities for more southern cities. Saving your harvest. Can you grow food indoors during the winter? Yes and no. If you live in a cold area, those short winter days probably won't offer enough sunlight to feed lightly hungry crops like peppers, even if you park your plant in a window. A small container of greens or herbs might do better, or your family can invest in an artificial light to grow food indoors all year long. An even better option is to learn how to preserve spring, summer, or fall crops to see your family through the winter. In addition to freezing them, you can can crops, fruits and veggies, dehydrate them, think raisins and other dried fruit, or ferment them, pickles, sauerkraut, and kimchi. A perennial plant is one that has a cycle of regrowth. Perennial flowers die back in the winter and return in the spring. Perennial crops produce food year after year. They include fruits like apples and grapes, as well as a handful of veggies and herbs such as rhubarb, asparagus, and sorrel. Perennials take an investment of time and effort when you first plant them, but then they keep on giving. A simple window placed atop a growing box provides warmth and protection from the elements. Cold frames extend the growing season by weeks. City chicks. A rooster crowing may call to mind country living, but roosters are alarm clocks for city people too. In many urban areas, chickens roam backyards and busy streets, until dinner time, that is. There are a growing number of chicken farmers in cities across North America. Some of these farmers prefer to taste and quality of locally raised eggs, or like knowing that the chickens that lay the eggs have been treated humanely. Some of the farmers have arrived from places where keeping chickens in cities is the norm. Others simply want the shortest distance possible between the nest and the egg cup. Just one more way to reduce food miles. Did you know that one chicken can produce up to 300 eggs in a year? That's taking a lot of cartons out of the food system. Of course, becoming an urban chicken farmer isn't as simple as building a coop and tossing in some chicks. Chickens need space to move around and scratch in the dirt. They need protection from predators, including falcons. Many northeastern cities, such as New York City, are full of falcons. In a small coop, if one chicken gets sick, all the chickens can get sick. And how will the chicken poop be disposed of? How will the farmer keep pests like rats out of the chicken feed? These challenges are a few of the reasons backyard chickens are banned in some places. Still, more and more cities are embracing the benefits of urban chicks and making it easier for people to bring their own chickens home to roost. In many cities, chickens are considered pets by law. Urban farmers may collect eggs but may not kill their own chickens. Does it taste like chicken? In North America, people tend to stick to small selection of meats: chicken, fish, beef, goat, and pork. We might go for duck or lamb if we're feeling fancy, maybe even deer or moose, and you can get a pretty good bison burger in Alberta. But most of the meat we eat is shipped in from big farms in rural areas, often thousands of miles away. In other parts of the world, meat is much more varied and may be raised much closer to home. It might include horses, guinea pigs, or hamsters, monkeys, and many other animals that aren't popular or legal to eat in North America or Europe. The types of meat, eggs, and dairy eaten in urban areas depend on local culture traditions and religious beliefs, as well as cost and the types of animals that can be raised in the cities. We love leftovers. Like some people, pigs will eat just about anything. In Mexico City, many of the people keep pigs in their backyards, feeding them leftover food, such as stale tortillas from restaurants, stores, bakeries, and their own kitchens. More than 3,629 tons of kitchen waste goes into pigs instead of landfills. Pets or protein. You may want to read this far away from Little Scooter's cage. In Peru, people eat as many as 65 million guinea pigs each year. The high-protein, low-fat meat is consumed throughout the country, including in cities, and is part of the diet in 98% of rural households. Buffalo shakes. Buffaloes provide 66% of the milk in Pakistan. They are also used to haul carts and plows, and their manure can be sprinkled on crops as fertilizer. Because it's time-consuming and expensive to bring milk to urban markets from the countryside, peri-urban buffalo dairies are being built on the edges of major cities. What's the beef with organic food? Why is meat produced by factory farms cheaper than meat that is organic, free-range, and local? Organic foods are grown without synthetic or human-made products. That means no pesticides have been used to kill pests, and no herbicides have been used to keep down weeds. Organic farmers use only natural fertilizers. They feed their livestock the foods they would have eaten in nature, such as grass for cows. They don't inject their animals with hormones to make them grow faster and bigger, or need to give them medicine that are used to keep diseases from spreading on factory farms. To grow things naturally, with no chemical help, takes extra effort and expense compared with factory farming, and that drives prices up. On the other hand, plant sources of protein such as beans and legumes are usually cheaper than either kind of meat. Swimming uptown. Urban areas are crowded enough without adding 1.8-ton heifers to the mix. Cows and pigs are space hogs, and it takes a lot of protein from feed to raise an animal that will be turned into protein. A common claim is a ratio of 10:1. That is, 4.5 kilograms of feed are needed to produce 0.45 kilograms of protein from animals. For fish, that ratio is 2:1. That's 0.9 kilograms of plant protein to get 0.45 kilograms of fish protein. Better, right? The hitch is that the world's wide fish stocks are being wiped out. We've become so good at catching fish, and our technology is so advanced that fish populations can't replenish themselves fast enough. As well, fishes often capture different types of sea creatures they don't need. Dolphins, turtle, and other species get caught in nets meant for others. Since getting fish into cities can be hard on the environment and costly, why not grow them right here? Raising fish in contained farms that don't affect other ecosystems means we can have our fish and eat them too. Aquaponics in action. You don't need a river running through a city to enjoy fresh, locally caught fish. An aquaculture farmer grows plants and animals such as fish and crabs in water. When you combine aquaculture with hydroponics, you create a farming cycle known as aquaponics. More than 80% of the seafood eaten in the United States is imported. Also, aquaponics dates back to the Aztecs and ancient Chinese practices. Large-scale aquaponics. Growing Power. Growing Power, an organization that runs farms and community food centers in Milwaukee and Chicago, uses a single pump to move water through a multi-level aquaponics system. The rest of the work is done by gravity. Tilapia and yellow perch live in a large fish tank that has been dug about 1.2 meters into the ground. They snack on worms, commercial fish food, ground up salad greens, and algae that grow on the side of the tank. A pump sends the water up to a gravel bed at the top level. There, a plant called watercress and beneficial, helpful bacteria clean the water. They break down the ammonia in fish waste, transforming it from toxic yank into nutrition-rich fertilizer for plants. The water drains onto growing beds, where crops and salad greens thrive. Finally, the water flows back into the fish tanks. Some of the fish are sold to local restaurants and at a growing powers market. Small-scale aquaponics. Food share. Many aquaponic farms are designed to harvest lots of plants and fish to sell. But more and more people are trying their hands at aquaponics at home and in schools. This veggie aquarium, a small-scale aquaponic system that grows both fish and plants, was designed by Justin Naidu of Foodshare Toronto. The veggie aquarium system allows bacteria to transform fish waste into a source of nutrition for the plants and the plants to filter the water for the fish. Not going to waste. About 5 million households in China use anaerobic digesters. Paris. Picture it in the 19th century. The horse-drawn carts and carriages. The piles and piles of horse poop. Parisian farmers turned all that equine waste into something amazing by recycling it for use in the city's urban food gardens. Today, we have a more scientific approach to reusing waste such as manure and food scraps. Anaerobic digestion may sound like a bad case of the burbs, but it's actually a smart way to produce energy and reduce waste and greenhouse gas. Here's how. The waste is put into a sealed vessel containing no oxygen. Tiny microorganisms munch on the waste matter, giving off gases such as methane and carbon dioxide. These are known as biogases and can be turned into energy through a process called combustion. Generators used the combusted gas to run devices that produce heat and electricity. After this process, waste is ready to be used at a high-quality fertilizer that has a much milder smell than manure. It helps grow the plants, which may in turn be fed to people and animals, and the process begins again. Animal manure can be used to produce power. One of the several methods of turning manure into power is converting it into biogas. This is done through a process of biological decomposition. In India, the biogas digester you see below uses cattle manure to produce methane as an alternative source of energy. Using manure to create a new source of energy helps reduce greenhouse gases and keeps the manure from getting into runoff water and polluting farm soil. Save sun power. It grows your urban farm. In cities and suburbs, solar power, which comes from the sun, is a clean and innovative source of energy for growing plants and heating and lighting homes and other spaces. Solar panels can be placed on roofs of individual family homes as well as on large corporate buildings. Smaller panels produce smaller but still useful amounts of energy, as on this garden light and parking meter screen. Renewable energy is energy that replenishes itself. It includes energy produced from the sun, wind, water, heat in the earth, called geothermal energy, and biomass, wood wastes, and biogases. Breaking it down, in 2009, people in the United States threw out 31 million tons of food. 97% of that food went straight into the garbage. Only 3% was composted. Composting is a simple and natural process that allows food waste and plant scraps to break down into new material, nutrition-rich fertilizer. Fertilizer is added to soil and sprayed on gardens to help plants grow faster and more healthily. Many cities collect kitchen scraps and fallen leaves, twigs, grass, cuttings, and weeds for composting at large facilities. But you can also buy a composter for your own yard. Why pay for bags of fertilizer from the gardening store when you can make your own? More important, why toss out scraps that can actually benefit the earth and help produce fresh food? In goes the food scraps and out comes the fertilizer. Place fresh food scraps containing a lot of nitrogen, such as carrot tops, onion peels, coffee grounds, and sandwich crust your mother didn't see you throwing away in the composter. Bacteria and fungi break down the food as it decomposes. Add carbon-rich materials such as sawdust, dry lint, dry leaves, and paper napkins. Every week, turn over the pile to circulate air and moisture, which will help the composter work faster. After a few months, the compost looks like soil. Mix it with the top layer of soil in a garden or a pot. Add water if necessary to keep the compost as wet as a wrung-out sponge. Water harvesting. Water harvesting can be as simple as setting a rain barrel under the downspout that delivers water collected in a building's roof gutter. A spigot makes it easier to pour the water out of the barrel. We may have plenty of waste, but water is another story. Water shortages are plaguing cities around the globe. About 1/3 of us live in areas where water is scarce. For example, in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, where many homes don't have running water, people have to spend up to 10% of their income to buy from local vendors. It's not just developing countries that are experiencing a water crisis. Urban areas in developed countries, including North America, are also feeling parched. Many have introduced water conservation programs that encourage people to use less water so everyone has enough for drinking, cooking, washing, and flushing away sewage. At Martin Luther King Jr. Middle School in Berkeley, California, a program called the Edible Schoolyard is teaching kids how to harvest water. For every 2.5 centimeter, which is 1 inch of rain that falls, the Edible Schoolyard's rainwater system can catch and store 757 liters, which is 200 gallons. It can hold a total of 22,712 liters, which is 6,000 gallons. Students use the water to help grow organic food. They're also learning how to cook. Water tower. The Colorado River provides 90% of the water supply of Las Vegas, Nevada, a city whose population has doubled since 1990, when the river levels dropped from droughts, and there have been some doozies in recent years. More than 500,000 people have to find ways to conserve water. A designer named Chris Jacobs has created a 30-story eco tower design for Las Vegas. It could produce water through condensation and purification, cleaning and recycling wastewater. That could be used to water plants inside the tower. At the moment, the space-age looking tower exists only on paper or on screen, but it may be just a matter of time before cities like Las Vegas will have to choose between building such innovations or drying up altogether. About 70% of fresh water worldwide is used to irrigate crops. Several countries, including Egypt, have to import most of their food because they don't have enough water to grow their own. Cities are desperately short on water, are rethinking their putting greens. The world's 32,000 golf courses need 9.5 billion liters, 2.5 billion gallons of water per day to keep those big lawns lush and green. Water that could be used and put to better use. Part 4. Your green thumb. Don't judge each day by the harvest you reap, but by the seeds that you plant. A quote by Robert Louis Stevenson, 19th century author. Thinking big. Although no one knows for certain who coined the phrase, think globally, act locally, it has been a guiding principle for millions of people. Think globally, act locally captures the idea that global issues like saving the environment or helping the world's hungry people can be addressed by taking action in your own community, school, or backyard. Small actions can add up to sweeping changes, and sometimes when you take action for one reason, you discover all kinds of others you hadn't considered before. For example, you might join a community garden because you like outdoor activities and then find yourself making new friends, cutting your family's grocery bill, and creating a more beautiful neighborhood. So, how will you help feed the world? By nourishing the earth, growing your school or community spirit, What seeds of change will you plant? Be part of a community. Joining a community garden can help new arrivals get to know their neighbors and connect with other newcomers. No doubt about it, cities can be tough. Hey, they don't call them the mean streets for nothing. But people are discovering that the city can be tamed with a spade and some community spirit. A chance to inspire. The Food Project in Greater Boston and North Shore areas of Massachusetts grow food, but its greater goal is to help teens inspire and support others to create change in their own communities. The project provides summer jobs to students ages 14 to 17, which plant, weed, and harvest produce on urban and suburban farms. Employees also serve lunches for hunger relief organizations and sell harvest at local farmers markets. Throughout the school year, members of the Dirt Crew, dynamic, intelligent, responsible teenagers, have opportunities to attend conferences, learn about designing green spaces, and take on leadership roles among volunteers. What's mine is yours. A website called sharingbackyards.com connects city people in the United States, Canada, and New Zealand who don't have backyards with those who have space they're willing to share. Just click on a city map to see the backyards available and to read a brief description of each. Meaningful work. The Wood Street Urban Farm in Chicago was established in 1992 as a training program for unemployed and homeless people. With only 27 hectares, 2/3 of an acre in size, it now produces more than 10 pounds of organic food and provides its members with meaningful work and the skills to improve their lives. A taste of home. Moving to a new city is hard. Moving to a new country is harder. With family and friends left behind, and sometimes the challenge of learning a new language, immigrants can feel isolated and lonely in a new city. Many of the items that line the produce shelves at the grocery store may at first seem exotic to someone from another country. It can be even harder when all the familiar foods are missing. Planting crops from home can be an enormous comfort. Of course, some may not be easy to grow in a new city because of differences in soil and climate. For example, tropical fruits such as bananas couldn't survive the frigid winter temperatures and a short growing season in Minneapolis, St. Paul, but others, for instance callaloo, a spinach-like plant from the Caribbean, transplant beautifully, providing a little taste of home with every harvest. Food for thought. Let's face it, it's pretty hard to grow all your food in your backyard, especially if you live somewhere like Winnipeg and love bananas, or to always buy from local farmers. How can you know that what you're buying is good for you, good for the planet, and good for the person who grew the ingredients? One way to look is for the fair trade mark on the products like bananas, mangoes, chocolate, and coffee. Fair trade products are those that ensure a fair price is paid to farmers. This means they have more money to invest in their communities and businesses, improving their farms, schools, healthcare, or anything else they need. Green transformation. The neighborhood of Kibera in Nairobi, Kenya, used to be a garbage dump. It's now home to more than 1 million people, about 1/3 of the city's population. Kibera residents are among the poorest people anywhere. Half of them don't have jobs, and they live surrounded by pollution, disease, drugs, and crime. An unlikely group of people have brought change to one of Africa's biggest slums. The members of the Kibera's Youth Reform Group are mostly young people in their late 20s. They spent weeks clearing rubbish from an area of the slum, which was no small task. It was 3 meters, 10 feet deep. Over 105 days, they turned the space into a small farm with the help of an organic farming organization called Green Dreams. The rookie farmers had to learn on the job how to grow food in the tropical climate. This includes irrigating, watering garden beds from water tanks throughout the droughts of the dry season. Some of the water is sold to the community, which doesn't have many reliable water sources. Though the garden is only 70 by 50 meters, it produces enough food to help feed the farmer families plus extra to sell. Just as important, the young farmers have brought a breath of fresh air to the neighborhood. It took less than 4 months to create the Kibera Youth Reform Organic Farm. What could you accomplish at your school or in your city in that amount of time? The Kibera Youth Reform Organic Farm has rows of pretty sunflowers, but no one is allowed to eat their seeds. The sunflowers were planted to absorb zinc and heavy metals from the soil to make it safer for planting crops. Because the sunflowers are so full of pollutants, the seeds are too dangerous to eat. From Motown to Growtown, Detroit used to be the center of the automotive industry and one of the wealthiest cities in the United States. But as the car building industry began to shrink, so did the city and its prospects. In an age where cities are ballooning, Detroit is emptying out. Since 1950, more than half of its residents have left, shrinking the city's population from 2 million to less than 1 million. Factories have shut down and homes have been abandoned and left to rot. Unlike many cities that couldn't be more cramped, Detroit now has more space than people to fill it. Amid this gloom, something positive has been happening in Detroit, something hopeful and green. Much of the city is now available for urban agriculture, as vacant lots are being reclaimed and reinvigorated. A charity called Urban Farming has established gardens throughout the city that are tended by community groups, and harvest is given away for free. And a company called Hans Farms is setting up what it claims will be the world's biggest urban farm. It hopes to turn city agriculture into big business. Empowering young women. At the Catherine Ferguson Academy for Young Women, a high school for pregnant teens and young mothers, students turn around their lives, their hometown, and their fortune for others far beyond Detroit's city limits. In addition to teaching students how to care for their families, the school offered an agri-science, the science of agriculture course, in which students learned how to grow food and raise bees, chickens, rabbits, and other animals. 3 agri-science students and their teacher traveled to Soweto, South Africa, to share their knowledge with other young farmers at the International Urban Youth Entrepreneurship Conference in 2010. Although the school has received media attention around the world and was even the subject of a documentary, it nearly closed in 2011 because of funding cuts to the public school system. It is now a charter alternative school. Food for thought. Throughout the world, girls still have far fewer opportunities than boys. They are more likely to miss school because they need to help their mothers at home, whether caring for siblings or doing household chores like fetching water. Projects that help families gain access to fresh food and water takes pressure off girls and gives them more chance to shine. In many cities, the majority of urban farmers are women, tending small plots to feed their families. Suburban Blitz. People in the suburbs, communities just outside cities, face the same challenges as city dwellers. Most buy their food in supermarkets, which tend to stock items from very far away. But some people in the burbs have a big advantage over a lot of city homes. Backyards. An Australian television show called Backyard Blitz transforms backyards from neglected eyesores to beautiful green spaces. The name helped inspire a new concept called Permablitz, which combines permaculture guidelines with fast, dramatic makeovers, blitz, in cities throughout Australia. Volunteers of all ages get together to share permaculture skills and turn backyards into edible gardens in just a single day. Here's the catch. If your family wants to have a blitz at your house, you'll have to volunteer at 3 or more blitzes first. Permablitz doesn't just encourage people to make good use of their personal green spaces, they also help bring neighbors together. Food for thought. In 1932, famed architect Frank Lloyd Wright presented a community plan called Broadacre City in his book The Disappearing City. He imagined a suburb that would include at least 0.41 acre per household for cultivating. Many homes in today's suburbs have a plenty of room for growing food, but not everyone takes advantage of it. Different plots for different folks. Need. She's moving out of an apartment and wants to be able to plant vegetables and trees in her next home. Solution. A suburban lot with a large backyard with good soil for growing. Need. Exercise because his doctor told him he needs it, fresh air, and now that he's retired, a new social scene. The solution? A community plot not too far from home. Need. She has a school assignment to cultivate one plant for the entire school year and record what happens to it during that time. Solution: a windowsill in her parents' small and busy house. Need: reliable source of fresh flowers for the floral business they're starting up in a northeastern city. Solution: to buy a share partnership in a large local farm business, including a greenhouse, so they can have flowers even in the winter months. The teaching garden. Before you set out with your shovels and seeds, you'll need to answer a few questions to prepare your school garden. Where will you plant it? Try to avoid high traffic areas where people might walk on your plants or drop litter around them. You may want to choose a small space with room to expand later. Remember that a number of vegetables require many hours of sunshine, and you'll need a water source very close by, whether it's a hose or a rain barrel. You may also need to add nutrition to the soil with compost. What will you grow? What suits your climate? How much sunlight is available? When will the crops be ready to harvest? For example, you can plant and harvest lettuce in the spring and fall. Other crops need to be harvested in the summer, when students aren't necessarily around. You may also want to include flowers and other decorative plants. How much will it cost? Make a list of items you'll need, such as tools, soil, fertilizer, compost, seeds, and containers. You may be able to borrow some or all of these items or ask for donations. What will you do with the food? Will the students who care for the garden take the produce home, or will you sell it, use it in the school kitchen, or donate it to a food bank or other charity? You might also like to make a sign for your garden. Post garden rules, such as please respect our garden, and label each crop. How will teachers use the garden? Your teachers may have great ideas about how the garden can be used as a teaching aid, and that may have an impact on where, what, and how much you plant. Talk to your physical education, science, and social studies teachers about how they might use the garden. Who will take care of it? Most school gardens are tended by their class or a garden club. To form a club, you may need permission from your principal, and you may need to involve an adult, a teacher, parent, or local gardening expert as supervisor. When will you take care of it? Will you take care of your garden during school hours? What about after school, on weekends and during holidays? If there is a gardening group in your community, they may be able to offer help after hours. Once you have preliminary plan, you'll need the support of your principal, teachers, school caretaker and students, parents, and community. Go to them with your plan, including a budget and a map of your garden. You might need to make changes after they've looked over your plans. Maybe they'll have some great ideas to add. Don't forget, you'll probably need access to a car to fetch bags of soil and compost. Do you know an adult who would be willing to help? Food for thought. An organization called Food Share, which promotes good healthy food for all, wants food literacy to be part of the curriculum in schools across Canada. Food literacy means understanding where food comes from and how to grow it, cook it, shop for it, and compost the scraps. Food Share would like all students to have this food education before they graduate from high school. Garden Smarts. Take a look at your school's grounds. What do you see? Asphalt? A bit of grass? What if just some of the space could be used for growing food? Like neglected sunburned backyards, many city schools are surrounded by land that isn't put to use or to any use at all. Some of that land could be used to grow food as well as flowers, trees, and shrubs. School gardens can be used as teaching aids for horticulture, biology, nutrition, landscaping, culinary arts, environmental studies, and more. School gardens have a lot to offer. They offer students a chance to get outside and move around during the day. They can provide summer jobs for students. Selling the harvest raises money for the school. They provide affordable, healthy food for students. They give city kids a clean, green space to hang out in. Working together in a garden encourages students to cooperate and gives them a chance to take on leadership roles. A survey by the Royal Horticultural Society in the United Kingdom found that kids who garden do better in school, have better job skills, and feel better about themselves. Community gardens on school properties help connect the students with their neighbors. A garden looks a lot better than asphalt. To market. The Bendale Business and Technical Institute, a high school in Toronto, operates Canada's first school-based market garden. With the help of an organization called Food Share, they've planted more than 26 raised beds, each 1.2 meters, 4 feet wide, and 6 to 12 meters, 20 to 40 feet long. There are also compost bins, a greenhouse, and rain barrels for collecting water. The landscaping and gardening students tend the garden during the school year, and students are hired in the summer to keep it going. Some of the harvested crops are cooked up by the culinary arts class in the school's kitchen and then served in the cafeteria. The rest of the produce is sold at the weekly student-run Bendale Market Garden. Conclusion: the edible city. Reading without reflecting is like eating without digesting. A quote from Edmund Burke, an Irish statesman, author, and philosopher. As you've seen, you can accomplish so many when you have an appetite for change. And the more you do, the more you can do. Use your positive experiences to inspire other people, whether they're your friends, classmates, neighbors, or city council. This map shows some of the places that make growing, buying, cooking, and eating local foods possible. Create a similar map of your city to show its food hotspots, as well as the areas that need work. Once you know where the opportunities and problems are, you can start making plans and putting them into action. About the author. Hadley Dyer writes and edits fiction and non-fiction for children and teens. She has been a regular contributor to publications such as the Globe and Mail, Toronto Live, and OWL, and an instructor in the publishing program at Ryerson University. She lives, works, and gardens in Toronto, Canada.